You know, sometimes a fight over a piece of property can spiral into something way, way bigger. Today, we're diving into some court filings that allege a simple dispute is anything but simple. In fact, they claim it's a massive criminal enterprise that involves city and county governments, private investors, and even acts of arson and extortion.
Let's just start with this one sentence from the lawsuit, because, wow, it gets right to the heart of it. The plaintiffs aren't just saying they were wronged, they're making an incredible claim that the justice system itself was used as a weapon against them. That right there sets the stage for everything else we're about to cover.
So, to really wrap our heads around the scale of this, we've got to start with the money. Because this is not some small claims dispute. This is a massive federal lawsuit. And the financial stakes are just staggering.
$200 million. Yeah, you heard that right. That is the unbelievable amount that brothers Keith and Paul Hartl are seeking. And that number is so high because this isn't just about recovering what they lost. They're suing under the RICO Act. That's the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the law they originally created to take down the mafia. The fact that it's being used here against cities and public officials tells you just how serious these allegations are.
And who are they suing exactly? Well, the list of defendants is pretty extensive. It's not just one person or one company. The lawsuit points a finger at a whole network of players, both public and private. We're talking city and county governments, real estate agencies, and a list of specific individuals, all allegedly working together.
Okay, and this is where the case really pivots into something else. See, the Hartls aren't just saying a bunch of bad things happened to them one after another. They are claiming all of these acts were part of a coordinated criminal conspiracy, what the law actually calls a RICO enterprise. So what on earth does that actually mean? Well, a RICO enterprise isn't some formal company with a logo and a CEO. According to the complaint, it's an association in fact. Basically, think of it like a pickup team for crime, a group of otherwise separate people and organizations that have allegedly teamed up for a shared criminal purpose. The whole key is proving they acted together in a pattern of illegal activity.
So, what does this alleged pattern of crime look like? Well, the complaint lays out a whole laundry list of what are legally called predicate acts. These are the specific crimes that form the backbone of the racketeering charge. And they range from things like mail fraud and filing phony documents, all the way to some incredibly serious allegations like extortion, witness tampering, and not one but two separate acts of arson.
Now, according to the plaintiffs, this whole thing wasn't just some chaotic crime spree. They describe a really sophisticated and organized operation with two distinct arms, each with its own method of attack, but both allegedly working towards the very same goal.
On one side, you have what the lawsuit calls the Maricopa arm. Think of this as the death by a thousand paper cuts approach. This group allegedly focused on fraud, weaponizing city authority. For example, they claim the city slapped them with a bogus $68,000 water bill for a property with zero water usage, all to create financial pressure. Then you've got the Mojave arm. And this side was allegedly all about brute force, arson, threats, and direct intimidation. And here's the detail from the filings that it's just genuinely chilling. It involves a key player in that Maricopa arm, a licensed mental health counselor. He's accused of illegally getting his hands on the Hartl sealed court files for one alleged purpose, to dig up their private health information and personal vulnerabilities to use against them. And if we zoom in on the alleged activities of that Mojave arm, the complaint lays out this timeline of escalating intimidation. It reportedly starts simply with the purchase of tax liens. But then, a suspicious fire breaks out. Months later, while one of the brothers is in jail, he allegedly starts receiving threatening postcards, followed by an attempt to send a notary into the jail to force him to sign documents. And then finally, a second suspicious fire ignites at another one of their properties.
So all of this just leads to the one big question, right? Why? Why would this whole network of public and private players allegedly go to such extreme and dangerous lengths? Well, the lawsuit points to a very clear, very powerful motive: money.
The alleged motive, according to the complaint, is tied directly to this number, $130 million. That's the estimated federal grant money from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, earmarked for the City of Phoenix's huge 5-year redevelopment plan.
And the lawsuit lays out what it claims was a pretty simple 3-step scheme to get a piece of that money. Step 1, you target a property and use bogus code violations and liens to get it declared blighted. Step 2, you unlawfully foreclose on it and grab it for the city's redevelopment program. And Step 3, the private members of this alleged enterprise then get to cash in on the new development projects that are funded by all those federal grants.
So this brings us to what might be the plaintiff's single most powerful legal argument.
They claim this wasn't just a series of crimes that happened to spill into a courtroom. They argue the conspiracy was a crime against the court system itself, a scheme designed to corrupt the entire judicial process from the inside out.
To make this case, they're relying on a legal concept called extrinsic fraud. Now, this is important. This isn't about somebody lying on the witness stand. Extrinsic fraud is deception that happens completely outside the courtroom, things like witness tampering or bribery, that is so corrupt it makes a fair trial totally impossible from the get-go.
And then the lawsuit makes this absolutely stunning claim, tracing the roots of this alleged corruption back decades. It argues that the foundational act of this fraud against the court happened years ago, when the justice system allegedly failed to prosecute the known perpetrator in one of the plaintiff's childhood molestation cases. The lawsuit contends that this failure sent a message that the system could be manipulated without any real consequences, and that, in their view, it established a blueprint for corruption that was just repeated years later.
So, you might be thinking, how do they possibly prove that the court process itself was that broken? Well, they point to an error that on the surface seems pretty minor, but they argue it's proof of a system that was deeply and fundamentally careless. Get this, on one single official court order, Keith Hartl's last name was spelled 2 different ways. To the plaintiffs, this is so much more than a typo. They see it as objective proof, Exhibit A, of a judicial process so reckless and so broken it couldn't even correctly identify one of the main people involved in the case. So, after all of these explosive allegations, where does this incredibly complex legal battle actually stand today? What happens next? Well, the case was initially dismissed by a lower district court, but the Hartl brothers are not giving up. They've appealed the decision to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And their entire argument really hinges on that concept of extrinsic fraud, which they believe is the key to giving the federal courts the power to step in, even when state court judgments are involved.
And so that's where the case stands now. The Hartl brothers lawsuit, as laid out in these filings, really forces us to ask a difficult and uncomfortable question. It challenges the very foundation of our legal process, and it leaves you wondering, when the system that is supposed to provide justice is itself accused of being the instrument of a crime, where can that justice truly be found?